So first of all, congratulations on Joan. I've been hearing nothing but good things about this show. What is it like to work on a show like this? And preparing the very stylistic cinematography that you did.
Oh man, it's been an absolute pleasure since reading the scripts. When I first read the first script, I said I want to do it because it's such a thrilling and powerful story about a woman that, facing so much struggles in her life, she decided to take like the wrong path, which has become a diamond thief. And to make it even more visual appealing, it's all set in London in the 80s.
Hmm.
So it was really a joy to be able to shoot it.
How exciting is it to get on a project like this where it's not just working with the director to create the visual style, but you getting to play around with it, getting to talk with the gaffers, getting the lighting set up, all this extra stuff in order to create the atmosphere for this very uh period piece in London.
Yeah, I mean, it always starts in the prep, as you know. So first of all, creating the concept. So the visual concept was very important because we can have so many different takes in the same subject
Mm.
that we had to be. I did a visual research, looking for references, looking for visual styles, for shooting styles that would make sense to tell that story. And then after I came up with this lookbook, as I call it, then we start testing. We did several camera tests, lens tests, makeup tests to develop how we're gonna shoot. And then we even created like special lamps so I could light her eyes even on the tiniest locations in the most complicated setup. So it's like a whole journey from
Mhm.
the visual concept to the final image. It was amazing.
Definitely. And reading about you, you have a very technical sense of what it is to be a cinematographer. You're very savvy. Where does this passion come from, and how did you become this way as a cinematographer?
I mean, I have a friend, a director friend, who always says that we are all filmmakers, we are all storytellers, and but each person plays a role.
Hmm.
So I am a storyteller in the role of cinematographer. So that's the way I I try to approach my work. I wanna tell the story with images and with lighting and with mood. So I have to master all the techniques, all the skills to be able to do that. But in the end, I'm a servant to the story. I'm not a servant to the skills or to my aesthetic pleasing, but I'm a servant to the story. So the story rules, and then I try to find the best techniques and the best ways to visually portray it.
Uh, Going along with that, how important was it to be very collaborative with not just your director, but everybody else on set? And how happy are you that you got to work with all these amazing people who all had the same mindset and were able to put this together in such a way to make it its own style?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the like the happy accidents, because sometimes you come up with you're in front of like an amazing script, but not everybody shares the same passion and the same view of this story. But luckily, the director and I, we shared lots of the same references and how we wanted to tell the story, and the gaffer also had the same passion of to be able to create the mood and the look that we wanted. So everybody was very collaborative in the sense that everybody wanted to really create a powerful images no matter what.
Mhm.
With the resources we had, how can we make it look interesting? How can we make it meaningful to the story, to the character? Because it's all about Joan. I mean, it was all about her journey
Mhm.
from a single mother, broke, bankrupt, abandoned, losing her child. Then she was, I wanna be powerful. I wanna have money. I wanna be able to recover my child. So it's all about her struggle and then her force. So we needed to be close to her. And the director and I shared the same concept that we wanted to be attached with her. We wanted the audience to to follow her footsteps.
Mhm.
And so we didn't want like a third, detached point of view. They wanted to be close to her, attached to her,
Mhm.
feel what she was feeling.
It seems that you are quite familiar with a lot of the cinematography and the history behind it. Um, what movies have impacted you in a way that you are able to help tell the story through the camera?
Oh, this is my possibly my favorite subject because I always say, sometimes when I give lectures or
Mhm.
or I have trainees on set, I always say film language, everything has been already invented.
Mhm.
We're just feeding from like the great masters from our craft. So it's just a matter of finding who really inspires you and who really, you know, meets or sees the story the same way you see. Because you have so many different options. You can tell the same story so many different routes. So it's all about being able to study, to watch, to be inspired by the old masters. For this specific show, I avoided watching anything that was representing the 80s, contemporary. I wanted to be truthful to the 80s scene. So I was digging into films from the 80s, especially the first half of the decade. I
Mhm.
was looking like books from stills photographer from the 80s, listening to songs from the 80s, everything that would kind of inspire us to dive into the world, but be more truthful. And then after feeding from this, then we would come up with our own visual style of the 80s, or how was her world to us. I mean, in our imagination. So I had my two major references was from filmmaking was Brian De Palma's Scarface, which is a brilliant, brilliant film shot by a great DOP called John Alonso.
Mhm.
It's an amazing DOP, and the film is so powerful. So they used the colors from the 80s. They framed in a very classic but very stylized way. And the other one is quite opposite, although very bold in the use of colors, which is Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas.
Mhm.
Also very creative, framing wise, color wise. I mean, Robbie Miller, the cinematographer of Paris, Texas, the Dutch cinematographer, is an amazing, so skillful, so so skilled, and also so sensitive. So we are trying to combine those two worlds. One is, Wim Wenders is German, and Robbie Miller is Dutch, and then Brian De Palma and John Alonso are Americans. So we're kind of combining two different views of the same period,
Mhm.
and they were very important as visual references for me. So I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah,
Mm.
I can definitely see why it's important to do all this homework and this research. For you, as you're looking at it for different projects to work on, do you get the opportunity to choose projects that are very diverse that you can study in order to create a new challenge for yourself? Are you able to really sit back and pick and choose how you continue on your in your career?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, that's how I wanna, manage my career. Ideally, because I'm a very curious person, so I wanna change subjects, so I'm kind of attracted to something that I've never done before.
Mhm.
But also there are recurring subjects that I like, so also attracts me. But so sometimes you go into the same subject just because it's a kind of a familiar face, or something that I kind of really like and I want to explore more. Because sometimes when you're creating the visual concept for a show, it has, as I mentioned, it has to serve the story.
Hmm.
But even though within that world, you can have a different take.
Hmm.
You can see that same world in a different way. So sometimes if it looks like it's the same project, but actually it's not, because you're gonna dig deeper and find different ways of portraying the 80s, for example. Or if it's a cop show, you can do a cop show in so many different styles. That's all about trying to diving and trying to find a new fresh way of seeing the same subject.
As you were talking about Scarface and Paris, Texas, there is a rigidity to that cinematography. There is there's this veil of sort of raw intensity. Um, how do you duplicate that? Because the lenses back then were much different. The way that things were shot were much different, and now we have digital. How do you replicate some of that feeling?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's just because they shot everything obviously in the 80s. They shot on film,
Mhm.
which presents a different dynamic range. Is a different, the image was created with a different curve, different contrast. But also, we're not, although it was set in the 80s, we still wanted to have a little bit of a contemporary approach. So it was kind of an homage to the 80s, but also a new take on the 80s. So what I did in the beginning was I wanted to use vintage lenses. I wanted to use lenses that kind of have seen that era.
Mhm.
So I wanted to be close to that. So I did a research on the lenses. We tried several different lenses, and we came up with a very nice uh, set. It's called the Movie Cam lenses. Lenses that were developed by Movie Cam, which was used to be an Austrian um, film camera factory, and they developed these lenses in the 80s. And when I tried them, I thought they were very beautiful. They're quite soft. They had like a character, but not too bold or too
Mhm.
obvious. So they really suited the show. And then the second part was, since we're not going to shoot on film, we're going to shoot on digital. How much do you want to mimic film, and how much do you want it to be a contemporary take on the 80s? So I did some tests, and I joined forces with Jet Patel, the colorist at Harbor, was a great collaborator. And then we did tests, and then we used 90s Fuji film base to create the look. And then from that base, we then evolved into our film look. So that was the approach. So it was kind of, in the beginning, it was kind of, let's go back to the 80s. Let's get 80s lenses. Let's get film stock base, but let's then depart from that and then make it ours, if it makes
No,
sense.
it makes a lot of sense. For you, how important was it to early on start watching the dailies and improve upon that?
Oh man, it was. We did it before we started shooting. Our last test, just 1 week before, was a hair and makeup test with the cast. And then for this test, we kind of tested all the colors and the contrast and how saturated or how contrasty the image was going to be. And then we developed a lot. Then we applied this LUT for the dailies in the first days of the shoot. And then I could be with the DIT and watch the footage after we shot and say, this is too contrasty, the blacks are too crushed, or the colors, the reds are too saturated. So it could tweak. So the first 3 days, I was still kind of adjusting a little bit the look, and then possibly after day 5, we have settled down on a look, and then we shot the rest. 17 weeks was 18 weeks shoot. We shot the rest with the same, almost with the same look.
Mhm. Do you stay with the project and watch it after your time is done with it, or is it just something that you have to let go before you start overly analyzing what you do?
It's kind of, it's obviously when you're watching the footage, you always, oh, things I could have done better, or why did I make this choice? So there's like there are moments that you look and say, oh, this is really what I wanted. I'm really pleased with this. This is exactly what I wanted. And then, I don't know, half an hour later, you watch something that say, oh, this is not as it should. So I always kind of in between. It's like a pendulum. Sometimes you say, oh, that's the correct path. And that's the moment to say, oh, I wish I could go back in time and make some corrections. Just because we are in a constant evaluation. If Because for me, the way I see what I do is like, does it make sense to the world I'm creating? Is When I look at the image, I say I don't want. It's not about my personal taste, although obviously my taste is in the mix,
Mhm,
but it's about how I better serve this story. So, for example, on this show, one of my first meetings with the director said, her eyes gotta be lit. I need to see her eyes all the time because the emotions or clash between being a jewel thief or a struggling mother, it's gonna be inside. So this demand, this request just triggered me from day one. So I need, regardless how moody or how dark or how weird was gonna be the scene, I still needed to have an highlight. And this is about the world we are creating. It's not necessarily about my personal taste,
mhm.
but it's about this world. Joan's world, we needed to see her eyes. We needed to be attached to her. So this creates like a rule, as I said. Like, well, sometimes we joke and call it like it's our Bible. Our
Mhm,
you know this is how our world happens. And in our world, her eyes had to be lit. But in some other worlds, like one of my favorite films, The Godfather, he doesn't light his eyes.
mhm.
Marlon Brando, the Don Corleone's eyes are not lit, they're like in shadow. So it's much more about the approach and what kind of emotions you want the audience to have and feel about the characters and their journey.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on this project. Thank you very much for your time. You are such a knowledgeable, passionate person. Thank you very much for taking some time to talk to me about this project.
Oh man, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about a passion project like this one.